Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let's move on to the next section of the surah. So then he makes this supplication full of gratitude to his Lord. ربي قد آتيتني من الملك وعلمتني من تأويل الأحاديث. Nurturing Master, you have granted me a measure of worldly authority. Min al-mulk, right? So this min implies tab'eed, partitive usage of min. So a measure of worldly authority, and taught me some of the meanings behind all kinds of speech. Originator of the skies and of the earth, you are my protective friend in this world and the next. When you take me back, let it be in a state of humble submission and add me to the ranks of the righteous. So this ayah becomes quite a lengthy discussion for Imam Razi, especially once we come to the part توفني مسلما توفني مسلما وألحقني بالصالحين. Because, as we'll see, there are two ways to take that. One is, as you see in this translation, the other is more literal. The more literal way is essentially, unalive me now. Right? Take me back now. I'm done with this life. So tawaffani literally means make me die. So make me die now as a Muslim, and join me now to the righteous who have passed before. So that is one way of taking it. And then a more sensible way, I would say, is to understand it as when you take me back, then make it in this state of Islam, right? But we'll see the discussion around that shortly, inshallah. It becomes very, very interesting. Now you see here, Imam Fakhr al-Razi tells us about his own feeling in this matter. He says, and here, in the printed copies of the book, it will be written in the third person. He might have originally written like this, قال مصنف هذا الكتاب. And then, it sort of gets adapted by those who copied the book. قال الإمام فخر الدين الرازي رحمه الله. And there are various different versions of that in the manuscripts. And then the dua for him as well. May God illuminate his proof. He said, I myself am deeply immersed in this state. If I were to open the door to describe the defects of these physical pleasures in detail, I can write volumes and barely scratch the surface. That is why I've taken to repeating this invocation of Yusuf alayhi salam. And when he says it, maybe he has a certain meaning for himself. This is a kind of tadabbur. ربي قد آتيتني من الملك. Imam Razi traveled in the lands and was, raised to the position of Shaykh al-Islam. By the way, when he's writing this, he's 57 years old, and he would pass away maybe 5 years later. Right? So he says, you've given me some worldly authority, some position. وَعَلَّمْتَنِي مِنْ تَأْوِيلِ الْأَحَادِيث. Look, he's been taught the ta'wil of the religion and of the book. فَاطِرَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ أَنْتَ وَلِيِّ فِي الدُّنْيا وَالْآخِرَةِ توفني مسلما وألحقني بالصالحين. He wants to be amongst the righteous that he writes about and who have gone before, of the prophets and the martyrs and the scholars, of course, right? So very, very beautiful reflection. And we're going to see more of this at the end of the surah, when we go also to learn about the fact that he is in pain over the loss of his son, Muhammad, right? His son who passed away. He's writing the tafsir of the surah while feeling that pain. And he doesn't mention that at this moment while writing this. He mentions it at the end of the surah. But then you kind of look back and think, okay, maybe that colored his way of, reading the ayat. And I suppose it raises a kind of question about the subjectivity of the Mufassir's experience. And I don't say that again to, make you skeptical, and I just to be awake to that, just to be awake to the possibility that if you're in a certain mood, or there's a certain moment in time, you start to write things with that in mind, right? If people write a tafsir right now, you might get some things, the pain that we are feeling about the genocide in Palestine and the surrounding area, right? How many times have I said to myself over the past year, what is this dunya? You know? And it's not like I didn't think that before, but I feel it more now. And I feel it more at the moment than maybe I will sometime in the future. The author of this, the author, may God be pleased with him, said, the exegesis of this surah was completed. All praise is due to God. On Wednesday, the 7th of Sha'ban, 601 of the Hijrah. Now he died in 606, as I told you. May the work be sealed with blessings and divine pleasure. At the time, I was deeply grieved at the passing of my righteous son, Muhammad. May God envelop him in his mercy and grant him special grades of bounty and beneficence. Now, I don't have much information. I think I've looked and hoped to know more about this Muhammad. But what we can surmise is that he was not extremely young, because he was he had moved away and was far away from his family. And that is one of the things that makes Imam Razi feel so sad about, what he went through at the end of his life. So this, to me, is such a beautiful thing, and a lot of people have responded very, have been very touched by what I've shared of this poem and of its translation. I've read this on different occasions. I read it actually, at a kind of a funeral or memorial of when someone had lost their child, and I shared this, and it connects me with the author. It connects you with the author in a way beyond the intellectual level, and just to understand that this is a person. He goes through things which we can relate to, and you can actually find him mentioning this at the end of several surahs. I think it starts from Surat Yunus. There's something mentioned there, and then Surat Hud, and then here in Yusuf is the most extensive one, where you see this poem, and then you see a mention of it all the way through Ar-Ra'd and Ibrahim, that he just mentions, I've written this while having some constraint in my heart. So these are the lines that he has composed in his memory. فلو كانت الأقدار منقادة لنا فديناك من حماك بالروح والجسم. If the fates were under my control, I would have ransomed you from your sanctuary with body and soul. ولو كانت الأفلاك تأخذ رشوة خضعنا لها بالرق في الحكم والاسم. If the celestial spheres accepted bribes, I would have presented myself as a slave in name and reality. The printed copies have al-amlak, which I don't think works, because it is not a standard plural of malak, which one might expect. If it has a meaning, then it would be angels. ولكنه حكم إذا حان حينه سرى في مقر العرش في لجة اليم. But it is a decree which, when its time has come, flows round the throne in a mighty stream. I think the other, the printed version might say, min maqar al-arsh. I'm taking these from various manuscripts that I compared to try to get the clearest meaning. سأبكي عليك العمر بالدم دائما ولم أنحرف عن ذاك في الكيف والكم. Forever will I cry for you with blood, and this has never wavered in quality or quantity. سلام على قبر دفنت بتربه وأتحفك الرحمن بالكرم الجم. Peace be upon the grave whose soil received you. I think some of them say بقربه. May the merciful provide you gracious hospitality. You can find in some copies بالنعم العمي. I think it's like that. وما صدني عن جعل جفني مدفنا لجسمك إلا أنه أبدا يهمي. Nothing prevented me making my eyelid a resting place for your body, except that it is always flowing. وأقسم إن مسوا رفاتي ورمتي أحسوا بنار الحزن في مكمن العظم. I swear, when they touch my decayed remains, they will feel the scorching grief from within my bones. حياتي وموتي واحد بعد بعدكم بل الموت أولى من مداومة الغم. Life and death are equal to me after you have parted. Nay, death is preferred to constant sadness. رضيت بما أمضى الإله بحكمه لعلمي بأني لا يجاوزني حكمي. I'm satisfied with what God has decreed and decided, knowing my fate will never pass me by. وأدعو لمن قد مات في دار غربة بعيدا عن الإخوان والأبي والأمي. And I pray for whoever died in a strange land, far from brethren, father, and mother. So this is the end of the poem. Actually, if you look in the printed copies, you would find it a little bit garbled, especially towards the end. You would also find that this line, which is actually from the poem, has been sort of accidentally subsumed within the subsequent paragraph. So the subsequent paragraph says this: وَأَنَا أُوصِي, I request anyone who looks through this book of mine and benefits from the many invaluable points contained within it. Some copies say بِقِرَاءَةِ الْفَاتِحَةِ, but many manuscripts that I looked at did not say that for some reason. To recite the Fatiha and supplicate, especially for my son and me, to receive mercy and forgiveness. I have always prayed for those who have done the same for me. May the blessings of God be upon our Master Muhammad, the members of his household and his companions, and abundant salutations, all praises for God, Lord of the worlds. Here I just wanted to show you a little bit of how this looks in a manuscript. I found one manuscript in which the scribe who was copying it writes in the margin that I too have lost my son, subhanallah, and he adds in the margin an additional few lines of poetry from himself. So I just want to show you that in just a moment, inshallah. But here Surat al-Ra'd then, and then this is another of the copies and how it's written in that copy just before Surat al-Ra'd. As it happens, there are some copies of the Tafsir which don't have the poem in it. And I don't know how to explain that. It's part of the sort of curious journey of Tafsir al-Razi, how it was written and compiled, the fact that we have also now kind of established with a fair amount of certainty that the whole thing was not completed by Imam Razi himself, but rather completed by al-Khuwayyi and perhaps others like al-Qamuli. But that is a story for another time, and you can find also some of that in videos that I've posted to the Ibn Ashur YouTube channel. But this is a poem that was written in the margin of one of the manuscripts, alongside the poem written by Imam Razi. So this is somebody who says, فَقُلْتُ وَقَدْ أَصَابَنِي مَا أَصَابَهُ بِمَوْتِ وَلَدِي يُونُس. So I make a special dua for the young Muhammad and his father, and the young Yunus and his father, and ourselves and our children and our families. May Allah make us among those who live by this Quran. May He guide us in knowledge and benefit us with what He teaches us. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.